Welcome to the Vacation Home Masters Podcast. Are you looking for the best ways to manage a vacation home, improve rental income, and control expenses? Are you a vacation homeowner, a professional property manager, or just thinking of buying a vacation home for the first time? Vacation Home Masters is a candid podcast on all topics in the rapidly changing vacation home industry. Our mission is to help you sort through the clutter to become better informed. Based in one of the world's most competitive vacation home markets, Orlando, Florida. This show is hosted by Gary Glass and his team of professional vacation home managers. You can find their free guides, tutorials, or contact them at vacationhomemasters.com. Let's begin the show.
Okay, so welcome to today's episode of Vacation Home Masters, and today we're going to talk about a hot issue that we see talked about all the time on forums on the internet, and that is the subject of service animals. And we're going to look at service animals versus emotional support animals, what the difference is, and what you need to know. We're going to look at it from an American perspective. I know people listen to this all over the world. In America, we're going to look at it from the American perspective, and also we're based here in Florida, so there are some state-based laws that influence us. What we do recommend is if you are based in the United States, just look up the laws for your particular state. Ultimately, the federal laws supersede all laws, but then some of those have derivatives that are based at the state level. So we recommend you do look them up. If you're in a different country, you might want to look up what the laws are for your country, because they're very different. Some countries have no laws whatsoever for service animals, and some countries here in America, it's actually a civil rights issue, the way it falls under the American with Disabilities Act. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to cover the following topics real briefly. We're going to look at what is, here in America, the ADA, or American with Disabilities Act of 1990, and how that affects us. What is a service animal? What does that mean? And then we're going to look at what is an emotional support animal, and what does that mean to us as vacation home managers or owners. And then finally, we'll just do a little synopsis on fake documentation and their accessibility, and what your options are. And finally, we will look at knowing the difference between, obviously, emotional support animals and service animals, and how this impacts you operating a vacation home. Our hypothesis is basically going to be, as vacation home owners or managers, you need to know this subject matter, especially here in the United States. Like we just previously mentioned, it is technically a civil rights matter with service animals. Many homeowners and property managers, they're just simply not aware, and it's not because they're malice people, they have anything bad. It's just that they don't know, and you need to take the time to fully understand what the laws are and why the laws were created. In conclusion, we're going to say, look, to protect yourselves, guys, you need to know what you're talking about when it comes to service animals, what the responsibilities are, and why they are protected. Let's get down to business, and let's look at the American with Disabilities Act. So the American with Disabilities Act was, here in America, was created in 1990 by George Bush Sr. And it was it basically prohibits discrimination against all individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, public and private places that are open to the general public. The purpose of the law is simple, is to make sure people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everybody else. Now, what we'd like to do at this point is just make a disclaimer. We're not experts on this subject matter, and based on your state and proximity, we always recommend, if you have any questions or you're thinking of implementing anything with regards to service animals, having read the states and federal statutes for your area, we always recommend that you do consult If you're not sure and there's a gray area that you're not sure about, consult with an attorney that specializes in disabilities law. It's money well spent, and you should spend that. You should be knowledgeable to the best extent that you can on this subject matter. The ADA here in America, it gives civil rights protections basically to individuals with disabilities, similar to individuals based on race, national origin, age, religion, and so forth. It's the same protection rights that are afforded to all citizens, regardless of their background here in the United States. So the ADA here in America, it's divided up into 5 sections or titles, as they call it, and they relate to different areas of public life. In 2008, it was amended again, and it became the American with Disabilities Act Amendments Act, or the ADAA, and was signed into law and became effective January the 1st, 2009. What we're going to look at next is we're going to look at, based under these American with Disabilities Act laws, the very specific subject that we see come up the most with vacation homeowners, that we seem to see getting discussed a lot on forums, and that is the use of service animals. And you have to look at the legal definition of a service animal, and that means an animal that is trained to do work or perform tasks for an individual with a disability. And that can be physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or a mental disability. And that's their job. So their task, the service animals perform specific tasks. So it might be helping a visually impaired person to navigate. It might be alerting individuals that are deaf. There's a numerous amount of tasks that service animals can be trained to do to help people with disabilities. One thing that they're very clear about in the statutes is that a service animal is not a pet. For purposes, the service animal also is limited under the ADA Act to a service dog or a miniature horse. So here in America, a person with a disability is entitled to full and equal accommodation, advantages, the facilities, the privileges of anybody else. The individual with the disability has the legal right here in America to be accompanied by a service animal in all areas, particularly in public accommodation. One of the things that they do set as a precedent for a service animal under the law is that the service animal must be under the control of its handler at all times. So sometimes we see on forums people are claiming they have service dogs, and then they'll go off to the theme parks for the day and leave the dog at the home. Technically, that's now not falling under the definition of a service dog, because a service dog is with their handler at all times under the ADA Act. If you get a call and you're made aware that there is a service dog, sometimes we've seen on forums people say, oh, well, we want to see proof that it's a service dog. You can't do that. That's against the law. They're telling you they have a service dog, and you may not request paperwork. Again, you just imagine it's someone else that's protected under the civil rights laws, and you ask for documentation. It would be ridiculous. And so a person who is disabled with a service animal, you can't ask for documentation for that animal. It's prohibited. Next, you can't, if you say, oh, well, if we have a dog stay in our vacation home, we're going to have to charge an excess cleaning fee. You can't do that. You're not allowed to charge a pet deposit or a service surcharge for people with disabilities that have service dogs. The reason is quite simple. It's discriminatory. The pet is a required part of that guest staying in your home, and you may not charge them an excess fee, because in effect you'll be charging them for their disability. And here in America, that's illegal. Next, you want to look at is the person with the individual liable for damage caused by a service animal? And the ADA says, yes, they are. If the service animal does any damage to the home, then you can rightfully charge a fee for the damages that were incurred, just the same as you would any other guest. Next is the service animal is the responsibility of the owner. So if the service animal did something to the home or to someone else on your property, it is the same as the owner doing it, the owner of the animal. So the service animal is liable not only for damage, but as if it was the individual owner of that animal themselves. So ADA is very clear that the service animal is the ultimate responsibility of the individual owner. Do explain if the animal is out of control, disruptive to or threatening, behaving in a disruptive and threatening manner. Just like a bad guest, you can ask them to leave, and like we say, the owner is ultimately responsible. What's sometimes interesting under the ADA law are private accommodations versus public accommodations. But the law is quite clear under the ADA law, subsection 6. They say that an individual with a disability, and that includes the service animal, is entitled to rent, lease, or purchase as other members of the general public. So if you're renting your vacation home to members of the general public and someone has a disability with a service animal, you would fall, the way we see it, under Section 6. So you have to make accommodations for them and be non-discriminatory as you would in any other area of the Civil Rights Act here in America. That's the thing that we think vacation home managers should read up on. If you have any questions, just read your state statute, the ADA Act, the ADAA Act now as it is. And still, if you have further questions, always consult with an attorney that specializes in disability law to make sure that you are doing the right thing. Now, what is interesting under the ADA law that quite often vacation home owners and property managers are not aware of is that the trainers of service animals are covered also under the ADA law. So they have all the same rights for the service animal as if they were the person with the disability, because they are the trainer, that's their job, and they are providing a service for people with disabilities. So if the person identifies themselves as a trainer with a service animal, they have been afforded the same rights as if they were the actual person with the disability. Now, under the Act, here in America, under Section 9, this is where we hear a lot of pushback sometimes from property managers and vacation home managers, and that is they have an inkling that the service animal in question is not a service animal, it's actually someone with a pet, and they are representing it as a service animal because they know the laws, and they know once they've identified it as a service animal, literally the only question you may ask at that point is what service does the animal perform? You are not allowed to ask any other questions. You're not allowed to ask for identification. You're not allowed to ask for pet deposits because these are not pets. These are service animals and they're an extension of that person with the disability. So probably more often than not, owners do get concerned because they think they might be told this just so someone can get their pet staying in the home for free, especially if there's a no pet policy. And the law does identify that someone who willingly misrepresents herself or himself, that they're qualified to either use a service animal or they're a trainer of a service animal and they bring, in this case it would be a pet, a non-actual service animal with them. It is a misdemeanor here in the United States, and you can perform up to 30 hours community service. Not sure on the operational side how this would come about and how you would follow through. Like we had explained previously, the ADA does say in public accommodations at least that the service animal should be with the owner at all times. So if, say here in Orlando, someone goes off to the theme park and leaves a dog in the house, saying that it's a service animal, you can ask possibly that person, say, our understanding is that the service animal should be with that person at all times, and see what they say. I'm not sure. We've never seen or heard of anybody reporting a fraudulent service animal, because it's just very difficult to navigate that process. So, but there are laws to protect it. But in my opinion, I think the laws need to be more stringent, not only to protect homeowners, property managers, public accommodations, but also to protect people with disabilities. Because if people are abusing that law, which I think here in Orlando we do see it being abused, but there's very limited, if anything, you can do about it. You might not even be sure of the fact. There's really very limited. So people are abusing that to bring in pets because they know the law, and they know the restrictions of the law, which are rightfully so. So it's a very tricky area to navigate. Our policy, at least from an operational standpoint, if someone identifies they have a service animal, literally, as far as we're concerned, that's the end of the conversation. They say they have a service animal, great, and we do not bring it up again. That's how we handle the situation. You just want to keep it simple. You don't want to overcomplicate this. This is a civil rights matter. You need to make sure that you are aware that it's a civil rights matter and that you behave and act accordingly. So this brings us on to our next subject area, which are emotional support animals. And this is where I think the confusion lies. Emotional support animals are not service dogs. Service dogs or service animals are very specific. They're for people with disabilities, and they are basically an extension of that person with the disability. The definition of an emotional support pet or support animal do not fall under the ADA Act. There's a couple of other laws regarding airlines and federal housing authority laws where reasonable accommodations should be made for emotional support animals, but they're not covered by the ADA law. Emotional support animals, especially as far as airlines are concerned, that's what we see in the news. They're covered under the Air Carriers Act of 1986 here in America. So ultimately, what is one to do? Well, unfortunately, people abusing the laws with regards to service animals or emotional support animals is part of being in the vacation home industry, because the many people that are genuine need these laws to protect them. What is one to do? First of all, you need to read up on the American with Disabilities Acts and how they apply to you. You need to read up on your state laws, or if you're in another country, read up on your country's laws with regards to protecting people with disabilities. And always, if you're thinking of implementing a policy and you're not fully aware of what, or you're not sure about what you're doing, whether it's covered, always consult with an attorney. Don't take our word for it. Don't go out on a limb and make something up, set your own policies. That's never wise. Make sure you are obeying the law properly, and the law is there to protect people with disabilities. When it comes to emotional support animals, as a vacation home manager or as a vacation home owner, here in America at least, you have little to no responsibility as far as emotional support animals. But for service animals, animals that perform specific tasks for people with disabilities, they have the same rights as anybody else coming to your home. There are caveats and nuances that you need to be aware of, but like we always say, just keep it simple. And in conclusion, here in America, the American with Disabilities Act and then the amended American Disabilities Act is set here in America to protect humans. It's to protect all people. We recommend strongly as vacation home owners or as property managers, it is your responsibility to know these laws, to understand them, why they were created. And also with emotional support animals, you also need to know what the rules are regarding those. They don't really affect vacation home managers, but again, you do need to know the difference, because we see a lot of times vacation home owners or property managers sometimes don't understand the difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal. So I hope you found this podcast interesting. If you can, just make sure you hit the like button. Give us a favorable review if you're listening on iTunes. It helps us get found. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast, because we generally release one podcast a week, sometimes two, to try and provide as much information of what's going on out there in the industry. We cover all things from, in this particular instance, service animals, to next week we'll be covering the best electronic locks and the advantages and different disadvantages of different electronic locks with regards to vacation homes. So we cover the gamut of issues in vacation homes, and we're always looking for the best methodologies to use and to employ. And also we'll be having guest speakers come on that are experts in their area. So for our electronic locks interview, we'll have a couple of electronic lock companies come in and join us on the podcast, and we hope you find it informative. So anyway, thanks for listening. See you next week. And like I say, be sure to subscribe. Thanks again.
Thank you for joining us on Vacation Home Masters. To find our free guides, tutorials, or contact us, visit vacationhomemasters.com. If you have questions or think we can help, we're just a click away. vacationhomemasters.com is your resource for quality information on all things vacation home.